Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. It's crazy how sometimes one person can come into a community like a hurricane and upend everything and destroy the peace. Yeah, guys, another Karen decided to ruin the mood in our first story. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Now I'm not speaking to a resident, even though she pays my salary. I, 30-year-old male, have been working as a concierge at a luxury condominium complex for some years. This place houses some of the most down-to-earth and wonderful people I've ever met. It almost doesn't feel like a job because I'm treated like family. Last summer, we had a resident purchase a condo. Since then, there have been non-stop issues with this individual who we'll call Karen. 50-ish female? When Karen first moved in, she began cultivating relationships with residents of the community. Within a month, she was on friendly terms with most of the residents she interacted with. This slowly changed as the months progressed. Within 6 months, I had witnessed her alienate most of those residents right away with her craziness. The building has an underground parking structure that consists of residential and commercial spaces. The building has a handful of commercial units that are attached to the main residential building. There are 2 floors, each with a gate. The spaces past the gate are residential, while all the others before belonged to commercial. COVID caused many commercial units to become vacant. Since then, we've been allowing residents to have their guests park in the unoccupied commercial spaces. A few months back, Karen called me asking about a pair of vehicles that were parked in commercial spaces. These spaces were located next to the first gate where she parks. She'd been using them for her own guests for some time. At the time, I answered truthfully that I do not know who they belong to. About an hour later, I received a call from a different resident, resident number 2. Number 2 let me know that she had her guests park in the spots mentioned previously. I told her that was fine. Those spots are first come, first serve. I did mention that another resident had asked about the vehicles. I reiterated that she had every right to park there regardless of what any other residents say. I should mention that resident number 2 was probably the last friend Karen had in the building. After Karen spoke with resident number 2, she found out who the vehicles belonged to. Karen told number 2 that her guests weren't allowed to park there. Number 2 then asked why Karen's guests could park there but not hers. This eventually led to a heated discussion that concluded with Karen losing the last person that was willing to talk to her. I get a call from Karen on my next shift. She claimed that I maliciously didn't tell her who the vehicles belonged to. Karen then blamed me for the falling out she had with resident number 2. By this point, I didn't want to argue and tell her. After all, I only found out after the initial phone call. By this point, I had enough. I told her that she can speak to the property manager about this issue. She then demanded I answer because she pays my salary. I reiterated and told her to talk to the property manager. She called me an a-hole and hung up. She has effectively stopped talking to me ever since. Definitely not complaining. And our second story. Stealing is not an appropriate response when you feel you've had bad service. This happened around 10 years ago, movie theater. I received a concern from the concession stand that someone had walked away with their concession items without paying. While not common, this isn't exactly a rare occurrence. Usually it's either a mistake or the person claims it was a mistake and I can't prove otherwise. They pay up and all is well. This was not like that. When the staff member was describing it to me, I felt right away that it sounded scammish. The customers, 2 ladies, were apparently pretty rude and demanding throughout the transaction. When everything had been retrieved and as it was time to pay, one of the ladies ordered a new item. When my cashier went to get the item, the ladies left. I reviewed surveillance to find out where the ladies went and find out what they look like. That confirmed to me that they intentionally left without paying. Sometimes the customer sets down their card, stops paying attention, and after a bit just assume it's been charged. Sometimes they play with their money while talking on the phone and forget there was never actually a transaction. People just don't pay attention. These ladies, though, darted away immediately after ordering that last-minute item. I watched for what movie they went into and then headed over. I brought an assistant manager along and found the women in the auditorium along with their husbands/boyfriends. I asked the ladies to step out, but only one did. No worries, we'll refer to her as B. Me. You walked away from the concession stand without paying. B. Yeah, the cashier was really rude, so I felt I shouldn't pay for my food. Me. Okay, well, you should have asked to speak to a manager and we could have helped you. Instead, you walked away without paying for your items. That's considered theft. I need you to pay for your concession items and then leave. B began to argue that it wasn't theft and she shouldn't have had to pay for the items when she'd received poor service. But I told her again she should have spoken to a manager. When she didn't relent, I told her that if she refused to pay and leave, then I would be forced to call the police. She made a mocking sound but went back into the auditorium. I sent the AM in to follow her in and make sure they were going to come out and pay. But he then called me on the radio and said he didn't see her. I thought they must have left via the exit door, so I dashed outside and into the parking lot to see if I could find them and get a license plate or something. The AM called back, though, and said he found them in the exact same place they were sitting before. Feeling pretty frustrated, I trudged back inside and asked the AM if he thought they were going to get up and pay. He replied they were just sitting there and not moving. I told him I was going to go ahead and call the police and instructed him to let me know immediately if they tried to leave or something similar. As an aside, a captain with the country sheriff's department runs security in the area my theater is in while off duty. Unless it's an emergency, we call for stuff before we call the city police or 911. So I call the captain. While waiting for the captain in the lobby, a man walked up to me, we'll call him Dan, and said there seemed to be a misunderstanding with his wife. Now, I may have been able to handle this a little more tactfully, and if I did, things might have gone a little easier afterwards. I have no regrets. Dan said there was a misunderstanding with his wife. I asked if his wife was the one who stole from us. He began arguing using the same poor customer service excuse as his wife. I ignored him and just informed him the police had been called. I told Dan he could pay for the stuff and leave or talk it over with the captain. By the time the captain arrived, B had come out to stand with Dan. The other couple, the second lady and her husband, were around, but they didn't really get involved. I'd already told the captain what had happened over the phone, so I didn't really speak. Dan explained his side of the story. Dan was very condescending towards me while speaking to the captain, but he was careful not to say anything specifically profane or insulting. Again, they used the same customer service excuse while also trying to say it wasn't really theft because they hadn't left the property. Captain explained that refusing to pay for their items was theft. He said it was technically defrauding a hospitality service or something, and they were at my mercy over whether I wanted to press charges or not. He didn't think I wanted to, so it was in their best interest to pay and leave. If they refused to pay, then he would require they provide their information so he could track them later if necessary. If they refused that, he would have to arrest them for obstruction or refusing to cooperate or something. I don't remember. Typically, when I tell someone to leave and they refuse and I call the captain, once he arrives, they change their tune from "I'm not leaving" to "I'll leave if he'll just give me a refund," which at that point I refuse because I've had to call the police. Same thing here. They said they'd pay for the concession product, but they wanted a refund on their tickets. I refused. They appealed to the captain, but he said I was in my right to refuse and he couldn't force me to refund them. Then they started to complain about a drink. Supposedly they had ordered Dr. Pepper and received cherry Coke. They now refused to pay for their drink, but would pay for everything else. I said I'd switch it out. Whatever, but they still needed to pay. I sent the AM, who'd just been standing there the whole time, to switch out the drink while I took Dan to a register and processed the payment. He cursed at me under his breath the whole time. I told him have a good night. But according to B, the AM had given her cherry Coke again instead of Dr. Pepper. They made a bunch of comments about how stupid we must be and how horrible our service is. We can't even get a simple drink right. I ignored them. They got their drink and finally left. They were not good people. And our last story. Neighbor steals packages and is now charging me. My neighbor's address is 50A Example Street. My address is 50 Example Street. As such, mail couriers always mix our addresses up during deliveries. 2 expensive packages arrived at their address, and there's photo evidence. Not even 24 hours after that, I go to their door and knock, and they said they never saw it. I called the police, and they said they have enough to charge them with larceny. 2 obstacles, though. There's 6 people living in the condo, so the police don't know who to charge. 2, they're charging me for breaking and entering, even though I never opened their door or went inside. Anyway, they have no basis for these claims. I have witnesses of me just knocking on their door. Edit, the neighbors told the cops that they wanted to charge me for this. Nothing actually happened. I'm good friends with the owner of their condo, their tenants, and they're about to be evicted anyway because they haven't paid rent in 3 months. Clarification. I honestly don't know about them pressing charges because I know I didn't do anything wrong. I do really want to press charges on them, though. There's photo evidence of it arriving at their place, but they're claiming there's other thieves in the neighborhood. This is not true. I've had packages that sit out on my doorstep for weeks on end while I travel and have never experienced theft other than when it gets incorrectly delivered. I would love to legally catch them in the act and collect evidence to successfully press charges. Edit. Everything ended up much more simple. The delivery service admitted their mistake. The courier had photos of the parcels near the neighbors' doors, not mine, and the neighbors did get evicted because they haven't paid rent. Choke on my packages, freaks. Hope it was worth it. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.